Camera speed.
Sound production, take one.
Action!
Welcome to From Beneath the Hollywood Sign. If you love old movies, Hollywood history, or the golden age of filmmaking, you've come to the right place. This is the podcast that talks about amazing stories of Tinseltown from another era. Hear fascinating conversations with writer-producer Steve Cubine, who quite literally lives just beneath the Hollywood sign, and actress-writer Nan McNamara. Now your hosts, Steve and Nan.
Steve, you and I have been talking about this episode for almost since the start of the podcast.
Oh, we have, and I'm so excited. It's finally here.
It's finally here. This is an actress who is celebrating a big birthday this week.
Yes.
It's Eva Marie Saint, who is turning 100 years old on July 4th. And she is one of our favorites.
I love her so much.
She is the epitome of the classic film actress.
Oh, she really is. You know, she was born on July the 4th, 1924, and her career has spanned 75 years. It includes theater and film and television. She's an Oscar and an Emmy winner, and she's also, and I find this interesting, she is the oldest living and earliest Oscar winner.
Yes, and we'll talk about it later in this episode, but we, in a previous episode, mentioned her winning
Beginner's luck.
Exactly, for her first performance. Let's kick this off where she was born. She was born in Newark, New Jersey, raised in New York City. Her father was a businessman, worked for B.F. Goodrich Tire Company. Her mother was a teacher, and she was all set to follow in her mother's footsteps. I think she's even interviewed as saying she was planning on being a third grade teacher, if I'm not mistaken.
I think so.
But after pledging Delta Gamma.
Go Delta Gam.
Go Delta Gam at Bowling Green State University in Ohio. Her house mother and house father play a key role in encouraging her to try out for a college play.
Yeah, and she had really no acting ambitions up to this point, but they saw something in her and they said, you know, we're putting on this play and you should consider trying out for the lead. Well, she tried out and she got the part and, of course, was immediately bitten by the acting bug.
Right.
Well, she didn't know how this was going to go over with her father and mother, her conservative mom and pop who wanted
I didn't
to be
know
a
how it was
teacher.
going to go over with my mother and father either.
This must be a conversation that so many people have across the United States and the world. But she goes home and she tells her loving parents, who think she's going to be a teacher, that she now wants to be an actor.
And I love the response. Her father, she describes her father kind of grabbing her hand and holding on to it and saying, honey, whatever you want to do, just do your best.
Oh, I love him.
I love him too. And just as a side note, every time she talks about her family, I get the sense they were incredibly close. Her father was a Quaker, a World War I veteran.
Mm-hmm.
Her mother made all her clothes.
I know.
Her and her sister's
Isn't
clothes.
that sweet? And she had an older sister, I believe.
Yes, she did. So she graduates from Bowling Green, and it's been recommended to her by her house father.
Yes.
Why don't you go to New York? There's this little thing called television.
Live television.
That I think is going to be a big thing, and it might be a way to break in.
Yeah.
So she gets to New York, and she hits the ground running.
Yeah, she pounded those pavements. She's going from casting office to casting office with her picture and resume, which is something you could do back in those days.
Yeah.
You could actually show up at the casting offices. Well, she ended up landing a job as an NBC page.
Wow.
And this gave her an entree into the world of television, and she eventually lands her first TV job on a game show called Campus Hoopla, where all she did was clap for contestants.
Right. She has a story of calling her parents to say, I'm going to be on TV. And she's like, well, not really on TV, but you can hear me clap. And they were so proud of her.
I know. She goes, maybe next week I'll get to be on.
Yes. So in 1947 and again in 1949, she is featured in Life magazine. She is not famous at this point.
No, she's just a struggling actress, and that was the whole angle. They wanted to follow the day in the life of a struggling actress in New York, and they chose her, and they follow her around to all the casting calls and what her life is like and what she goes through.
She said that they even put a pedometer on her to see how many steps she had taken.
I love
Long
that.
before the Apple Watch, right?
Yeah. This gave her exposure, and maybe because of this, she ended up getting cast in a TV movie version of A Christmas Carol, which featured, and I love this, it featured John Carradine as Scrooge and David Carradine as the young Scrooge.
Don't you wish that could be seen?
Yes.
I'm sure it's long gone.
Oh, I'd love to see that.
Now, she also started to book some modeling jobs, but she did not care for that.
No bueno on the modeling, yes.
And she started taking acting classes with Herbert Berghoff, who, as many people know, he was one of the founding members of the Actors Studio. He collaborated and eventually married Uta Hagen,
yes.
who, if you're an actor, you certainly know that name.
That is an acting power couple.
Oh, right? Oh, my gosh, yeah, fierce. And she eventually discovers the Actors Studio. She auditions, she's accepted, and she begins studying with Lee Strasberg and Elia Kazan.
Yeah, and one of the cool things about her classes were some of her classmates.
Yes.
In this class
Unbelievable.
Were future stars Marlon Brando, Paul Newman, Carl Malden, Kim Hunter, Ben Gazzara, and Eli Wallach. Not too shabby.
Can you imagine?
Yeah.
I mean, and they're all just starting out.
Yeah, yeah.
So her studies help her land a pretty important part in two different ways, I think.
Yes, but a little heartbreaking.
A little heartbreaking. Yeah. So she auditions for the Broadway production of Mr. Roberts, directed by Josh Logan, starring Henry Fonda. And this is my kind of part, and I think she agrees. It's the only female part in the whole play.
Right.
I did a play called Terra Nova, and I was the only woman, and I loved it. So she gets the role. She's playing Lieutenant Anne Gerard.
Yep.
They preview in Philadelphia. It's being moved to Broadway. And then... However, so Josh Logan pulls her aside, and what does he say?
Oh, he said, Eva Marie, I think we've got a big hit on our hands, but I'm just not sure about you. So he asked her, and this is just adding insult to injury, he asked her if she would step down and become the understudy for the role.
Which is just horrific.
Devastating.
I'm trying to think, would I rather be fired or asked to be the understudy? I don't know.
Well, you know what? At the time, she was absolutely devastated. She forced herself not to cry in front of Josh Logan, and she asked him to think about it. She goes, let me think about it. So on the way back to her house that night, she's on the train, and she vowed, of course, at this point, she's crying hysterically, and she's feeling all the feels, but she vowed that she was going to decide by the time her train landed at her station, whether she was going to continue acting or give it up and go back to school and be a teacher. So by the time that train pulled into her station, she decided, by God, I'm going to be an actress. She went to Josh Logan. She said, yes, I'll be your understudy. Let's do this.
Yep.
And eventually, Marlon Brando's sister, Jocelyn Brando, who we've talked about, I think, on the show.
And Sibling Rivalries episode.
Yeah, she stepped into the role.
Right.
She got a lot of experience, and I think, she made great connections. Even though it wasn't ideal for her, it was a very important step in her career.
Yes, yes. So we mentioned the Life magazine article in 1949. She's again followed around New York. She continues to work in live TV, and I found it fascinating what she says about working on live TV. Of course, you're gaining a lot of experience, but she likened it to, if you can do live TV, you can do anything. She said, I was never scared again.
Wow.
Because everything is pressure. You're being broadcast across the country.
If you break a hill or miss a line or stumble over a coffee table, you make it work.
Or accidentally expose yourself, which she did.
Which she did. That's right. I've heard that interview.
She told that story. Oh, my gosh. So she has some amazing television credits. I mean, she was on the Chevrolet Teletheater Suspense and Lights Out. She appeared in Bonnie Maid's Versatile Varieties on NBC. She was one of the original singing Bonnie Maids in live commercials. And then she was on a soap opera, which I didn't realize.
Yeah.
One Man's Family from 1950 to 52.
Yeah, so she even did the soap route. But it was about this time, that very important change in her life. It was about this time that the 27-year-old actress married her boyfriend, budding producer and director Jeffrey Hayden. Saint and Hayden would go on to be one of the most loving, long-term couples in Hollywood.
Over 60 years they were married.
Over 60 years. They had a son, Daryl, born in 1955, and they would have a daughter, Laurette, born in 1958. They would remain a loving and devoted couple until Hayden's death in 2016.
And she always talks about him whenever she is interviewed, about how long they've been together.
To hear her talk about him is so beautiful, because the love and respect she has for that man is so palpable.
And she talked about the fact that a famous actress, I believe it was Katharine Hepburn, said she didn't think actresses could be married and have a career. And Ms. Saint said that because Jeffrey Hayden was also a producer and a director, she felt that they could really understand each other, and that she kind of agreed with Katharine Hepburn that it would have been hard if it was an actor. But they clearly loved each other dearly.
Meant to be. One of the great couples, yeah. In 1953, it was a real game changer for Eva Marie Saint when she was cast in the live TV movie version of Horton Foote's incredible play, The Trip to Bountiful.
Wow.
Which starred the great Lillian Gish as Carrie Watts, and she had a small role as the young bride that Carrie encounters on the bus as Carrie makes her way back to her old homestead in Bountiful.
Right.
Lillian Gish took a special interest in Eva Marie Saint and became an early mentor for the young actress.
That November, The Trip to Bountiful debuted on Broadway with Lillian Gish and Eva Marie Saint. They were joined by Jo Van Fleet as Gish's daughter-in-law, Jessie May, and Eva Marie Saint won the Drama Critics Award for her performance.
Yes.
So take that, Josh Logan.
Yeah, take that, Josh Logan and Mr. Roberts. What important thing came out of this, and this was really, really a game changer, was that Elia Kazan, who had taught Saint when she was at the Actors Studio, saw her in the production of The Trip to Bountiful on Broadway.
Right.
And he asked her to audition for his new film. It was a little drama called On the Waterfront
Oh my
in
gosh.
1954. And the role was Edie, who was the Catholic-schooled local girl who falls in love with the local bad boy, Terry, played by Marlon Brando. You know, the casting ultimately, and I find this interesting, came down to Eva Marie Saint and another very charismatic young blonde, Elizabeth Montgomery.
Who we love.
We love her, and she would have been interesting in the role too, but I think he chose the right one.
Yes, he did.
Yeah.
This is amazing. She would be making the film. She'd have to wrap up filming to go back to Broadway to do Trip to Bountiful. I mean, how amazing.
I know, what a dilemma. And I never knew this. The play, The Trip to Bountiful, it closed after only 39 performances.
That was surprising to me.
Yeah, it really surprised me. So after the play closed, it was a little easier for her to do the film, and that's when they moved into their night shoots too. It was after she was free in the evenings.
Yes.
Saint considered Elia Kazan her favorite director, and in a 2014 interview with Robert Osborne, she tells this wonderful story about how Elia Kazan pulled her aside during the filming and told her that she was very, very friendly and exuberant and talkative and was just a social butterfly on set, and that this was worrisome to him. He said, think of yourself and your energy as an hourglass. Each day you have a certain amount of sand, and that's all you have. You've got to know how to use that sand and make it last throughout the day, because when I'm seeing close-ups of you at the end of the day and you look tired, I don't like it.
Right.
She said it was a life lesson and a professional lesson that she has never forgotten. She learned to modulate her energy on set.
And just a side note, that Robert Osborne interview is on YouTube.
Yes.
So you can watch it, and it's fascinating.
Yeah.
You know, she also attributes the success of On the Waterfront to the fact that so many of the people involved were all Actors Studio trained. So Carl Malden, Kazan as director, and of course, Marlon Brando. So for her, as we alluded to earlier, her film debut, she did the near impossible. She was not only nominated for Best Supporting Actress, Oscar, but she won her first film.
And she was also nominated for a BAFTA award as Most Promising Newcomer.
Right, right. Have you watched the clip of her accepting her Academy Award?
It's adorable.
It is so adorable.
Well, because she was very, maybe 9 months pregnant when she won. And she runs up on the podium, she gives the Oscar a little peck, and then she says, I may have the baby right here.
And she almost did, because her son was born 2 days later. So.
Yes. After the stellar film debut, you think that she would go right into another great movie. But she chose to go back to New York and go back into live television, which I think was an interesting choice for her.
I do too.
In 1955, she did receive her first Emmy nomination for her performance in the Philco television Playhouse, where she played the young mistress of E.G. Marshall in a teleplay called Middle of the Night, which was written by Patty Chayefsky. And she earned another Emmy nomination for the 1955 televised version, and I would love to see this.
Me too.
Of Our Town. I had no idea there was a musical version of Our Town. Of course, it was adapted from the Thornton Wilder play of the same name, and her co-stars in this production were, and get this, Paul Newman and Frank Sinatra.
So I didn't know that Paul Newman sang.
Well, does he?
I don't know. We don't know. We don't know.
We'll be the judge of that when we see this telecast.
So after that, she decides to go back and she does a feature, which is a little strange of a choice.
I find this an odd choice. After doing On the Waterfront, you follow it up with this.
A Bob Hope movie, 1956.
Comedy.
Yes, a comedy, That Certain Feeling. And she plays the ex-wife of Bob Hope, who is a cartoonist.
Yeah, but she does get to sing and dance.
Yeah.
And she said that she loved working with Bob Hope.
Yes.
They remained, I think Bob and Dolores remained very close friends with her the rest of her life.
That makes sense because they had such a long marriage as well. The four of them, I can see them hanging out together. So I watched the film that we're going to talk about next that she was in just a few nights ago. 1957, A Hat Full of Rain. She's playing Don Murray's very pregnant wife. It's this cutting-edge film. It's really about addiction.
Yeah.
It's kind of a kitchen sink drama. But here's what I have to say. Tony Franciosa plays the brother. Eva Marie Saint is the most grounded of everybody on that screen.
Is there a lot of smackting going on?
There's some smackting. Yeah, there's some smackting.
Okay.
Lloyd Nolan plays the father.
I love Lloyd Nolan.
She somehow, though, you just look at her, and I understand addiction being depicted one of the first times, maybe.
Yeah.
There's
Over
just
the top addiction.
There's a little bit of an over the top thing. Sorry, Don Murray, but she is really, her performance is just exquisite, and you really just, as I said, keep going back to her in it.
Well, this performance is one of the performances she is most celebrated for. In fact, she was nominated for a Golden Globe Award as Best Actress. She won the New York Film Critics Circle's Award, and she was nominated for a BAFTA Award as Best Foreign Actress.
Wow.
So a lot of praise for this performance.
Yes. So next comes MGM's Raintree County, 1957, which I know one of our listeners has said, tell us when you can find the movies and where to find them. I could not find this one to watch again recently. I couldn't find it anywhere.
Oh, interesting.
But it's this epic historical romance Western.
I love that description.
Yeah, based on Ross Lockridge's novel, directed by Edward Dmytryk and starring Montgomery Clift, Elizabeth Taylor, and Eva Marie Saint. What a triangle.
That is a trifecta of beauty.
It really is. But interesting things happen on this film. They start filming and Montgomery Clift kind of famously gets involved in a near fatal car crash, and the production had to be shut down for, I think it was 8 weeks.
Yeah, it was a long, long time. I've heard interviews with her that she was supposed to go overseas with her husband, and this delay on the production really interfered with that. And she finally went to the head office and said, we have got to finish this. I am due in Europe with my husband.
Yes.
So she actually raised her voice for once.
Yeah. So Montgomery Clift does return to filming. His face is permanently scarred.
Yeah.
And I think that was really the beginning of some real troubles for him.
You can watch his performance, and you can tell in that movie the scenes he filmed before the accident.
Yes, you can.
And the scenes after, because he tended to lose his confidence.
Yes.
And it actually shows up on film.
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
Eva Marie has a lovely story about Monty. I'm going to call him Monty.
She
was shy herself, or is shy herself, and she invited Monty to her dressing room to have lunch. And she's shy. He comes in, he's shy, and they just sort of sit there and don't say anything. And they eat their lunch.
Awkward.
And then, ends in silence. They're eating in silence. They go back to the scene that they're supposed to be shooting, and it goes absolutely beautifully. So,
he was saving it on camera.
He was saving it.
That's funny. Raintree County was not very well received.
Yeah.
It got really mixed reviews. It lost money at the box office due to its high production budget, but it did earn 4 Academy Award nominations, including Best Actress for Elizabeth Taylor.
So this next film that Eva Marie Saint is in, 1959, I'm just going to tease it. And before we talk about that, probably one of her most well-known performances. Steve, what's this week's Hollywood Pop Quiz?
Well, the pop quiz is going to tie into this next movie.
Okay.
And the question is, in Alfred Hitchcock's movie North by Northwest, which Eva Marie Saint might have starred in, who did MGM originally want cast in the role that Eva Marie eventually took?
Oh, this is a good one.
Yeah.
We'll be right back with more about the glorious Eva Marie Saint after this.
All right, Steve and Ann will be right back, but first another stop on the Hollywood tour. Tippi Hedren didn't exactly have to fake her fear during that climactic attack in Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds. That's because they were real birds. You see, for 5 straight days, bird handlers literally threw ravens, doves, and pigeons right at Hedren. And at one point, they even tied some live birds to her costume. Now, the birds pecked at her incessantly, and the experience was harrowing and exhausting. In fact, a doctor had to convince Hitchcock into giving her a whole week off to recover. Cary Grant, who witnessed part of that shoot, later told Hedren, quote, "You are the bravest woman I've ever seen." And now back to Steve and Ann from Beneath the Hollywood Sign.
Hey everybody, welcome back. And before we get further into Eva Marie Saint's illustrious career, I wanted to give a shout out to our listener of the week. And this one comes all the way from down under Australia. It's Lynette Madden. And Lynette, thank you for reaching out to us. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for following, subscribing. And Lynette wrote us a really great email, and she wanted to see an episode about Richard Carlson.
Oh,
So,
we love Richard Carlson.
You know what? And because of your email, I've actually written an article on the blog about Richard Carlson, and we will soon be turning that one into an episode in the coming months.
Yeah, let's do that. Thank you, Lynette. Thanks for listening. All right, this is the moment, right?
Yes.
We're going to talk about North by Northwest. Alfred Hitchcock, of course. Here's the thing. This is such an interesting role for Eva Marie because it's very different from anything that she's ever done. I think she was even surprised to be offered it.
Yes. It's funny. It's not surprising that he chose Eva Marie Saint. She
blonde.
certainly physically had the qualifications for the Hitchcock blonde, which had become a very familiar trope, I guess, if you will. But he really saw something in her, but all he'd ever seen her in were these sort of drab dramas, which he called the kitchen sink dramas, where she's just in an apron at a sink crying.
Like Hat Full of Rain.
Yes. So he knew he had to mold her into the perfect Hitchcock blonde, which took some doing.
You're right. There's an interesting story about her first meeting with Hitchcock and his wife, Alma. And I think it was Eva Marie's mother who somehow knew that Hitchcock loved the color beige and loved women wearing white gloves.
Yes.
So she had a beige dress in her wardrobe, and she wore white gloves, and she went to lunch at their house. And she got the part.
So see, thank you, Mama Saint.
Exactly.
One of the things that Hitchcock is known for is this meticulous attention to the aesthetics of his leading ladies. Mm-hmm. He was no less meticulous with Eva Marie Saint. He had her cut her hair into a chic bob, and when Helen Rose, the MGM costume designer, presented Hitch with all these clothes that she had designed for the character to wear, Hitchcock hated them. So he took Eva Marie Saint to Manhattan, and they went on a big old shopping spree at Bergdorf Goodman's. And he carefully helped pick out every article of clothing she wore for the movie. And Eva Marie Saint very hilariously said that she felt like he was her sugar daddy, buying her clothes.
Yes.
She also, in a great interview, she said that she was so surprised when it came to Hitchcock that he took such precise care in crafting the look of the character, the hair, the makeup, the clothes, the shoes, the purse, even down to the rings and the bracelets. But when it came to helping her create the inner life and feelings and depth of this character, she was pretty much on her own.
Yeah.
I mean, he was very hands-off in that department. I think he figured, I hired a competent actress, figure it out.
Yeah, figure it out. Yeah. He gave her only 3 notes. He said, lower your voice, don't use your hands, and always look directly at Cary Grant. I would love those 3 pieces of direction.
Who can go wrong with that? You know?
Right? Exactly.
Yeah. You know, there's another great story, and I think it just tells you how interesting, we'll say, that Alfred Hitchcock was, because he was so concerned with the image of his leading ladies.
Right.
There's one time he caught her drinking coffee from a styrofoam cup. He had a fit. He told her, first of all, his leading lady should never be getting her own coffee. Someone should do it for her. So he then had someone bring her a fresh cup in a china cup with a china saucer. He was obsessed with appearances.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
You know, she has worked opposite some pretty spectacular men, and I can't let this go by, being questioned about working with Cary Grant and how he was. Apparently, Cary Grant, in his contract, could control his lighting, which, gee, that sounds like a great idea, right?
I know.
And he noticed that Eva Marie Saint was squinting in one of their scenes. And it was because of his lighting.
Yeah.
And so he called over the lighting guy and said, hey, Can you turn that down a little bit? But he never said it was because of Eva Marie. He just noticed it and said, let's change the lighting.
What a gentleman. I love that.
I know. I love that too.
I love that.
And there's a wonderful documentary from 2000 about North by Northwest. It's by Peter Fitzgerald, and it's narrated by Eva Marie Saint. It's called Destination Hitchcock, The Making of North by Northwest, and you can find it on YouTube.
Oh, I would have checked that out. After North by Northwest, you would think that she could write her own ticket. I mean, it was such a successful film. It was such a critically acclaimed film.
Yes.
That, this was going to propel her to the top. But you know what? Eva Marie Saint sort of chose to limit her film work. She wanted to spend more time with her husband and her 2 kids, which was an interesting choice, especially when you're right at the pinnacle of stardom.
Yes, yes. She does go on in 1960 to the film Exodus, directed by Otto Preminger and starring Paul Newman. And apparently Otto Preminger had to show Paul Newman how to kiss Eva Marie Saint.
I heard that interview where I love the fact that, of course, Otto Preminger steps in for Paul Newman. He's going to go in for the kiss on Eva Marie Saint. Well, she said that the whole time this was happening, that she was looking at Paul Newman behind his shoulder, like making faces and rolling her eyes.
I love it.
Not slick move, Otto.
Yes.
A lot of people don't know this, but Exodus, it was sort of the movie that helped end the blacklist in that it was written by Dalton Trumbo, who was very famously blacklisted as part of the Senator McCarthy Red Scare.
Right.
Well, this was the film that actually restored his film credit, and he got credit on the film.
Wow.
So it really was the first film that really took a blacklisted writer, gave him his credit. He didn't have to use a pseudonym, and it really started the change forward.
That's wonderful.
Yeah. After this movie, she appears in a really wonderful but very little remembered family drama called All Fall Down in 1962, which was directed by the great John Frankenheimer. It was written by William Enge, and it featured a killer cast.
Yeah, it sure does.
It's Warren Beatty. He was coming off the successes of Splendor in the Grass and The Roman Spring of Mrs. Stone in 1961. It also starred Angela Lansbury and Carl Malden and Brandon DeWild, who I know we've talked about on a couple of episodes.
Yes.
It is such an ethereal, complicated, whimsical, wonderful performance. It's really one of my favorite films of hers. I wish more people knew this movie.
Yeah. Well, moving into the mid-60s, in 1965, she's, again, opposite to superstars. Vincent Minnelli's soapy drama, The Sandpiper. She plays Richard Burton's wife, who has to compete with Elizabeth Taylor.
Wow.
Yeah.
No easy task.
Another Elizabeth Taylor competing with Eva Marie Saint for the man.
Yeah, and Eva Marie Saint loved Elizabeth Taylor. She says in many interviews how warm and welcoming and sweet Elizabeth Taylor was. So she had nothing but nice things to say about her.
Next up, again, this is a surprising one.
And I love this movie.
Yes, me too. 1966, The Russians Are Coming, The Russians Are Coming. Norman Jewison's satirical comedy. She plays Carl Reiner's wife, who must deal with a Russian invasion on their sleepy little island off the New England coast.
Such a wonderful, wonderful movie.
Yeah.
Well, she came back to John Frankenheimer for her next movie. It was a sports drama called Grand Prix in 1966, which starred the great Jim Garner.
Yes.
But Eva Marie played the mistress of a Formula One race car driver played by Yves Montand, who became one of her favorite leading men.
Well, we happened to just watch that film a couple of months ago because, Lindsay...
When I was 5 years old, my dad took me on a summer vacation to Los Angeles, and we watched that film at the Cinerama on Hollywood Boulevard.
Oh, how cool is that?
His dad also took him to meet Elizabeth Montgomery on the set of Bewitched, but that's another story.
What?
I know, crazy.
All right, that's another episode.
That's another episode. I love how she talks about Yves Montand because
she had the biggest crush on him.
Oh my gosh. She's asked about, what was it like working with Cary Grant, Paul Newman, Montgomery Clift, and she says, they're like chopped liver. She's like, oh, Eve. She just had such a crush on him.
I heard one interview where somebody asked her, all right, you get to choose Montgomery Clift, Paul Newman, Marlon Brando. And she goes, oh, that's easy. Yves Montand.
Yes, exactly. Wow.
Eva Marie wasn't the only one to get a crush on Mr. Montand. Also, her daughter Lorette, who was a little girl at the time on set, she had the most massive crush on him, and they became buddies, and they actually wrote each other for many, many years.
I love that.
Which is adorable.
I love that. Well, 1968 brings us to Eva Marie in The Stalking Moon, Robert Mulligan's Western. She plays a woman with a half Native American son, being escorted through New Mexico by a former Army scout played by none other than Mr. Gregory Peck.
She got all the best leading men.
She has all these great leading men, and rightly so, right?
Yeah. In the 1970s, she re-teamed with Bob Hope, great leading man, maybe not Cary Grant, good looking, but it's Bob Hope.
Yeah.
It was in a comedy called Cancel My Reservations from 1972, which was directed by Paul Bogart. It also featured Ralph Bellamy, Forrest Tucker, and a young Ann Archer.
Right. And then she returns to television in The First Woman President, 1974, which is about the First Lady Edith Wilson's influence on the country after the stroke of President Wilson, played by Richard Basehart, a favorite of this podcast. And then she follows that with the epic Western TV series, How the West Was Won, 1976, 1977, featuring James Arness. And she actually gets Emmy nominated for that, as well as another TV show that's one of my favorites.
Yes, in 1978, she does a guest star role on the NBC comedy Taxi, starring Judd Hirsch. And this would not be the last time that Eva Marie Saint and Judd Hirsch appeared together, which we're going to get into that in a little bit.
Yes.
It's a great story.
Yes. So the 1980s keep her really busy on television in some groundbreaking films. The TV movie The Best Little Girl in the World, 1981. Wow, Jennifer Jason Leigh. I remember this film.
I remember this so well.
Yeah, struggling with an eating disorder. Maybe one of the first times that
I think it was. It was very groundbreaking, this subject matter.
Charles Durning plays her husband. She's also in a remake of Splendor in the Grass, which I've never seen.
I remember this. I saw it when it came out.
She plays Melissa Gilbert's mother.
Yeah, that hawkish mother. Are you still pure, Deanie?
Oh, no.
Oh.
Nobody wants their mother saying that to them.
If you know, you know. She was also really wonderful in this tense 1984 miniseries called Fatal Vision about a couple, Eva Marie Saint and her On the Waterfront co-star, Carl Malden, who spend nearly a decade trying to prove that their son-in-law murdered their pregnant daughter and their two granddaughters.
Right. And then in 1986, Nothing in Common with Tom Hanks. Oh, yeah.
Such a good movie.
Jackie Gleason. Oh.
Yes. Yeah, what a change of pace for Jackie Gleason. I love that he took on that kind
toward
of
the very end of his life. Yeah.
Cold, aloof father
She
character.
plays his wife.
Yeah. It was also in 1986 that Eva Marie began a recurring role as Sybil Shepherd's mother in the popular detective romance TV series Moonlighting. She played that role until 1988.
And those are now on one of the streaming services has taken those on. So
yeah, finally, after many years.
All of the Moonlighting, yeah. So she continues in TV movies throughout the 1990s, and we'll just touch on a few of them. My Antonia, 1995. Based on Willa Cather's novel, she plays Meredith Baxter's mother in After Jimmy in 1996, about teen suicide. And she's a passenger in the TV miniseries Titanic, 1996.
I remember that one. I do.
But here's one that you really remember.
Oh, yes. She ended the 90s with a very memorable guest star turn on the popular NBC comedy Frasier in 1999, I believe, where she played the mother of Frasier's producer Roz, played by our buddy Perry Gilpin.
Wow, that's amazing. And it was one of our pop quiz questions a few weeks back.
Was.
So she's back on the big screen in the 2000s. She appears in the romance adventure I Dreamed of Africa in 2000 with Kim Basinger, and the heartwarming comedy drama Because of Winn-Dixie.
Oh, about the dog. I love that movie.
Yeah, Jeff Daniels and Cicely Tyson. And then Don't Come Knocking, 2005, directed by Wim Wenders.
Yeah, with Sam Shepard and Jessica Lange.
Not too shabby.
Not too shabby at all.
And then she plays Clark Kent's mother. The Bryan Singer-directed Superman Returns in 2002.
Her last film credit to date is in the 2019 drama Mariette in Ecstasy, where she plays the mother superior to a young nun taking her vows.
Wow.
I know.
You know, I'm going to make a little segue here. The reason you and I are sitting across from each other right now doing this podcast is because of this next person that we're going to talk about. Amy Landers Eagles, who I met many years ago doing theater. She introduced me to Cameron Watson, who introduced me to Steve Cubine.
That's right.
And she's why we're here. And she and I share the fact that we both got to meet Eva Marie Saint, which was thrilling.
Yes, I know you've talked about your experience meeting her before, but do you want to give us kind of a quick recap?
Just a quick recap. I was in a theater production in Studio City. It was at a theater that's no longer there, above the bowling alley. And
right.
I had heard a rumor that she was in the audience. And normally, as an actress, you just sort of wait, and you come out when you're done. And I was not going to miss her. And I was just going to go right up to her. And I did. And I said, Ms. Saint, because I wasn't sure, is it Ms. Maria Saint or Miss, I didn't know how to, yeah. But I said, Miss Saint, it's such a thrill to meet you. And she could not have been more lovely and complimented my performance. And it was a thrill. Yeah.
Okay, you can die now.
I can die now. So right now we want to patch in Amy Landers Eagles to hear her thoughts about Eva Marie Saint. Hi, Amy.
Hi, Amy.
Hello, Steve and Nan. Here are my thoughts on Eva Marie Saint. First of all, I love that you're doing a podcast about her, and I cannot believe she's going to be 100. I worked with Eva Marie in 1994 at Playmakers Repertory in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, on Death of a Salesman. She starred opposite Judd Hirsch, playing Willie Loman, and her husband directed the show, Jeffrey Hayden. And at the time, it was a little bit unconventional casting because she was 70. And obviously 70 is a bit too old to play that part, but she didn't look it. She was so beautiful and still so radiant, and she didn't act it. And Judd was definitely younger than she was at the time, and she really wanted to be directed by her husband. So they came to Chapel Hill to do this show together, and it was so beautiful. And I remember being so fascinated that it was the first time I'd ever met anybody who'd won an Oscar. And she was so gentle and so kind, but also such a professional. Such a professional. Yeah, I just have nothing but the fondest memories of her. And then she and her husband helped me when I first moved to LA and was a young actor. And they made some connections and introductions for me and got me in an acting class, and just so kind. Just really, really kind and lovely. So that's it. That's my Eva Marie.
Thank you, Amy. Great memories of your time with Eva Marie Saint. Thank you for that.
I think what I've gleaned from watching her work and then hearing more about her background, I think in revisiting her films, we all know what a wonderful actress she is, but I think we've also learned what an amazing human being she is. And it's just so wonderful to get to talk about her.
It absolutely is. I've always loved her. I've always been a big fan. But after doing research for this episode and deep diving into some of her interviews, I am even more madly in love with her as a person than I ever was as an actress.
Me too. Yeah. So we want to take this opportunity to say, happy birthday, Eva Marie Saint.
Happy birthday. We love you, Eva Marie Saint. Come on the show.
Steve, what's the answer to this week's Hollywood Pop Quiz?
Well, the question was, in Alfred Hitchcock's classic film, North by Northwest, who did MGM try to push off onto Hitch to play the lead female role?
Can I give the answer?
Yes.
Sid Charisse.
Yes.
And Sophia Loren.
Wow, that would have been a really different movie.
And we'll just leave it at that.
Yes.
We would love it if you would give us a 5-star review. And please follow us on social media. Our handle is @FromBeneathTheHollywoodSign. We're on Instagram, Facebook, and you can watch the podcast on YouTube.
And we'd love to hear from you. So let us know, what's your favorite Eva Marie Saint? Do you have any experiences with her? We'd love to hear this stuff. Please email us at info@FromBeneathTheHollywoodSign.com.
That's this week's view.
From Beneath the Hollywood Sign.
You've been listening to From Beneath the Hollywood Sign with Steve Cubine and Nan McNamara, the podcast that celebrates amazing stories of Tinseltown from its golden era. Join us next week for another episode and learn something else about Hollywood you probably never knew. Take a moment and give us a 5-star rating and a positive review. And tell your friends about us too. It'll help grow the podcast. Visit Steve's website at FromBeneathTheHollywoodSign.com. The executive producers are Steve Cubine and Nan McNamara. Executive producer and post-production supervisor Lindsay Schnebley. This podcast is part of the Airwave Media Podcast Network. Visit airwavemedia.com to listen and subscribe to their other fine shows like The Box of Oddities and The Shallow End with Schnebley and Toth. Copyright 2024, all rights reserved. That's a wrap.